Well, good morning developers. Let's start developing. As you know, December is the month of Advent of Code, and Advent of Code is basically a puzzle kind of context that's been going on for, well, I think this is the seventh year. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Yeah, this is the seventh year, and we're going to be doing some live coding, and we're going to be solving the puzzles using TypeScript. Since it's December and since it's Advent, most of the puzzles are kind of connected with Santa. So let's see what some trouble Santa got into this time and how we can help him. The format is that for 24 days we will have a puzzle in two parts that are interconnected, and we will need to solve them, and we will need to provide a numeric solution to our problem. Usually it's numeric, sometimes it's some kind of a string, but the beauty of this is that it doesn't require you to do any programming if you don't want to. Basically, you can solve this using pen and paper. But it's gonna be kind of tricky, for at least for the lastish puzzles, to do them without programming. But in another sense, it doesn't force you to use any language or any kind of framework that you might need, and allows you to use whatever you want. So the goal is to solve the puzzle. How do you solve it? That's your problem. So we're gonna be solving them using TypeScript, and I have some kind of a setup already made, so I will be reusing the one that I used the previous years. As I've already showed, and I can brag about it a little bit, is that I have all the 50 stars on the previous years. Yeah, there is a very nice ASCII animation about this. So I have 300 total stars. Hopefully by the end of December I will have 350. The puzzles are still open, so if you want to test yourself on the puzzles from the previous years, you still can. But let's get back to this puzzle. So we're on a ship, the overboard alarm goes off. Apparently one of the elves tripped and accidentally sent the slate keys flying into the ocean. So Christmas is in trouble because Santa cannot turn on his sleigh because the keys are in the ocean. Of course, we have a submarine for just such an emergency. It's covered in Christmas lights. Of course it is. It has an antenna that should be able to track the keys. Oh, this means that we will be trying to boost the signal strength, and we need 50 stars to do that, and we will get 50 stars by solving puzzles. So this is the task. As the submarine drops below the surface of the ocean, it's automatically on a swept sea floor, a small screen. Okay, so at least the first task is linear. I was afraid because that the floor would be an array or a 2D something, but it's a 1D thing. This reporting depth. First order to figure out how quickly the depth increases. Count the number of times that the depth measurement increases. Oh, I have a inkling of what the second part will be, because we need to see how quickly it increases, and that's usually the second difference. So I guess that for the first part we will need to find the first difference, and for the second part we will need to find the second or the nth difference or something like that. Yep, there are 7 measurements that are larger than a previous one. How many measurements are larger than a previous measurement? And my puzzle input. So we always have an example that is always representative, and the guy that actually creates the puzzle, Eric, is very careful so that any situation that we will encounter in the real input is actually encountered in the example as well. So it takes quite a lot of time to develop the puzzles. I've heard some talks on it by And they are a thing of beauty, in my opinion. And you can see that my input is a bit bigger than the test case. But any solution that works for the test case should work for this, especially as we have linear running time. So that means that our input is actually a line of numbers and our output is just a number. So I can say that we're gonna be returning these. Yeah, this is our input, and we need to make sure that our part 1 thing returns 7. So this is a relatively simple. We can do a map, but in order to use a map method in TypeScript, usually mapping is when you are having all the data mapped to something else. And now we need to take pairs of data. So we need to do these two numbers and then these two numbers. So while that thing is possible, it's not the best use of your time. So what we're gonna do, we're just gonna do a for loop. And we're not gonna start the for loop from 1, we're gonna start from 0, as it should be. We're gonna start our for loop from 1. And you can see that I'm using GitHub Copilot, which is a great tool because it usually can guess the direction you're going. And so this is some weird artificial intelligence that says, well, if you're starting your loop intentionally from 1, most likely you're doing some kind of a comparison. So this part is completely correct, and this part is completely wrong because we're doing something else. We're gonna have a count. It's gonna be 0, and we can say if the current is the bigger than the previous, this part is correct. That means that we do have an increase, and that means that we need to increase the count not by that much but by 1, and then we need to return the count. For all of you juniors out there, GitHub Copilot won't change you, won't make your jobs obsolete. Yeah, it might help you do your jobs better a bit, but I'm not seeing it in any way that just using AI to code will make anything better. Coding is the easiest part of software development. Anyway, since we're done here, let's look at the terminal, and of course I have a few nice commands that will help me. I can just do npm run start, and this will execute my test. I'm getting the result of 7, and I was supposed to get 7. Well, it could be that my code is correct. So then my next thing is that I will need to get my input. I think the format was like this. This has to have the same name as the code file, and now we do the magic of copy and paste. I know that I have a method that's called read input lines. I will try to use that. Yep, and this should be day. Let's see what the method is. Read input of the day, and we are looking in the folder get date day 01. Yeah, so we're looking. If we use this with the parameter 1, it will look for a file day01.txt. So this will be an array of strings, and here we will do a bit of mapping, because like this it won't work. Process input returns a string array. Why? Oh, we are expecting to return a number array. So we will map it. So for any line, we will need to parse it into an integer. I will always put a 10 here because we might have some weird numbers that might not get parsed correctly. First of all, let's just see what our input is. One thing that we need to be sure in these such cases is that we're actually reading the input correctly. If you read your input incorrectly, you will never get a correct value. So our input is an array of numbers, and the first few are 127, 147, 148, 147. That sounds like about right. And we have 2000 of these numbers, and the input says that it has 2000 of these numbers. Okay, I'm quite confident that I've read the input correctly. And says that we have 1602 changes, and now we have the moment of truth. Let's see if our solution is correct. That's the right number. We have one gold star and we just need 49 more. Well, let's see. Considering every single measurement, oh, I'm a bit off. Every single measurement isn't as useful as we expected. There's just too much noise in the data. Instead, consider sums of a 3-measurement sliding window. Oh, sliding windows, those are interesting. Again, consider the above example. Start by comparing the first and second 3-measurement windows. So for each, we are taking the 1 and the 1 before them. In the first window are marked A. Yeah, the second window is B. So from these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 values, we are creating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 3 measurements, and each measurement is this number and the two numbers before that. So in order to get the sums, we will need to create, we can start from the second number and then run to the 10th. Yeah? Yeah, so we have 8 two measurements, and then we run exactly the same algorithm on, as we did in the first part, on the sliding window measurements. Well, let's do just that. I will once more change my input from the real one to the test one, because I know that I'm expected to get 5. So I have a second part. Usually it's quite possible to mangle your code for the first part to get the second part, but to be honest, I want them to be separate. So a lot of the time I will just rewrite some code in the second part that I'm doing in the first. So in that way I'm able to run part 1 and part 2 independently of each other. So in part 2 I will never depend on something that got calculated in part 1. If I need it, I will recalculate it again. If the calculation is complicated, I will refactor it out into a method. So to get the 3 sums, so what we want to do is, first we want to do is calculate the 3 sums, the sliding windows, the windows. Yeah, this won't be obvious for anybody who has not read the documentation, but of course that people will need to read the documentation if they want to make sense of what this does. So in this case we will start from 2, and yeah, we can do it that way, but this is the simplest way. So we have input of I plus that input of y, the previous one and the previous one. We know that there are two previous numbers because we're starting from 2, and this is window actually. And why not create an array like this, and then we can just add it to this. So once this code is done, we will have an array of length -2, where we can actually run this code again. Only now we're not running it on the input, we're running it on the windows. Window, window, window. And yeah. So again, this is a relatively simple code, so I will just copy and paste it. Let's try it out. Result for part 2 is 5. And now you're excluded, you're included. So we are running full speed ahead. It says 1633. Just a side note, maybe. This kind of tasks, when we have a linear list, we can use a tool that is very good for managing linear lists. And that tool is actually Excel. Yeah, let's see if we can solve this task using Excel. Maybe it will be a bit faster because we usually don't need to write some code. And we don't need to think too much to avoid the thing that we are putting 2000 items and receiving 1999. Off by one errors are very complicated in development, but in Excel we can just say, well, don't put a formula in this cell. And we can hear this minus this. And just do it on the whole 2000, and here we can say count if on this whole range and now the most complete, yeah, what this whole range, comma, and the most complicated way is to actually write the formula. Count if on this range, the whole range, and then if it's bigger than 0. When the first one, yeah, it is a formula. How do I write the criteria? I know that I can put it like this. Well, to the Google. Logical operators. to put it as a string. Yep, and we gotten the correct value. And for the second part, well, it's similar, only we start here and we can say it's this and this and this. And we have that. Yeah, it went overboard. And then again we can do, again skipping the first row, is this minus this. And if we copy this over, yeah, 1602 and 1633. Let's see if those were indeed our values. 1602 and 1633. Yeah, sometimes Excel is your friend, especially when you're doing this kind of non-repetitive computations. Of course, my code is much more stable and whatnot, and it can run for a million values, and we can script it and schedule it and whatnot. But in this specific case, I needed my code to run once. Not all the tasks will be easy to solve using Excel, but this one specifically, since it is a linear, the input is a linear structure, it was extremely easy to get solved in Excel. But we did it in TypeScript and I'm quite okay with the solution. It's a relatively low-tech solution. The most complicated thing we use this for. But increasingly, as we get more complicated, we might have to use a more complicated data structures and more complicated management of data and thinking about it. And the reason I'm using TypeScript is because I quite like it. And it's a simple language and it's very powerful and it allows you to do everything you can do with JavaScript and lots more. You can show that I forgot basically to cast this as an array of numbers, and TypeScript was smart enough to tell, well, you said you're gonna get an array of numbers, and I was able to do that. To it's incredibly easy to get started with TypeScript, but in order to get proficiency, you might need this. Let's see if I'm able to see it, to show it. Yeah, and you can notice it's my name right over there. So I'm one of the co-authors of the TypeScript workshop, and I am a bit biased, but from what I've read from the book, it is a nice book. It will level up, so to say, your TypeScript knowledge. And the good thing is that this was not done by professional writers, it was done by professional developers. And that means that you won't receive too much praise and whatnot and flowery language. You will get development tips. Plenty of them. You saw it, it is a quite large book. So if you want to get hands-on experience with TypeScript from people that do have hands-on experience with TypeScript, I heartily recommended it, and not just because I wrote it. Parts of it. So until tomorrow, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay developing.